Today I am reviewing an asset that I made for our game Project Grove over the weekend. It's an adapted version of an asset we already had. Luckily, because I'm not an artist, someone's already made a great stylized skeleton for us. So I'm just adapting that to have a sort of fungal infection and be rigged so we can move it around and pose it in a few different places. To get underway, I use some of Basic Shapes and Maya's sculpting tools, which I haven't used before. I would normally bring sculpting stuff into ZBrush or something like that, but one, I don't have that installed right now, and two, I don't have my drawing tablet set up, so I was like, I'll just do it in Maya. So Maya's sculpting tools actually surprised me on this, that they work pretty well. Working through the high poly mesh was pretty easy. I was only adding a bit of normal detail. I wasn't doing anything crazy. I didn't have to do any crazy shapes or any really specific details. It was just about giving some normal textured detail and information for Substance to bake. At the moment, for my sculpting, I am literally just using my mouse. So it's not impossible to sculpt with just a mouse. Of course, it's better with a drawing tablet. Working through with just a mouse, you just have to be repetitive and careful and spend a lot of time smoothing out your marks, because all your marks come out with a real sort of tube-like feature because they haven't got any pressure information. So you have to really go back and taper things off and work on smoothing that out. The skeleton already has textures that I'm going to be adapting, so I'm just unwrapping the new bits that I made and bringing those over into Substance. The baking process started out a bit mixed. It would be better if it just worked the first time, but baking in Substance is pretty quick these days, so just do a few bakes, testing out different features and different toggles, different settings, different things until it looked right. Again, this is a pretty simple bake, so I was pretty confident it was going to work after just a few attempts. Once I got the bake sorted on the new bits, I started playing around with different colours. I had a bunch of different concept art and sort of inspiration images, and so I was trying this sort of gold purple mix theme that I just didn't like. It looked really good in the concept art and really good in the reference images I found for magical funguses, but it just felt wrong. So I went with a more naturalistic green, yellow hue. The base layer was just a Substance smart material that I adapted the colors and the textures a bit and some projection issues, and then worked through some hand painted stuff. A big part of the art style is that hand painted element, but hand painting the whole thing entirely would be ludicrous. It would take ages, whereas we want to keep assets flowing quickly and get them in quickly. This being a magical thing, I'm adding some emissive to it. Emissive textures are very easy to add in Substance. You just add it as a new material layer on your texture set settings. The emissive layer is something that we use a lot to describe this is a magical thing in the game. So doing it here is just an example for that. Once I had all the base textures dialed in, I use something that I use a lot in Substance Painter, which is the blur slope filter. This is something that really adds that extra stylized nature to standard Substance materials or standard materials you might import off the Substance workplace or whatever it might be. It's something that just blurs out and chunks out the colors. It makes it look more painterly, more stylized. It's something that I learned from a few different YouTube videos, but it's something that I've used a lot, and it's something that really speeds up the process. This combined with a bit of hand painting can really take assets to the next level when it comes to stylized work. Once I've got all those base textures sorted out, I just start dialing in, doing some hand painted, sorting out the emissive. Some of it was a bit strong, some of it was a bit weak, trying to create a bit more of a feel and a logic behind the emissive and making it feel more like a logical piece of the world. I always like to put a bit of thought into like, why is it glowing? What's making it glow? Okay, maybe it's going up the spine because it's controlling it, things like that. It's sort of thinking through the logic behind the world and making sure that everything fits. And that's how you make one cohesive game art, but also cohesive games in general. The last job for me inside of Substance on the texturing is just doing a material variation, a color variation for the skeleton. I'm just gonna mask it off, make one big block color with a bit of variation and then mask it off. I don't like hand painting the location because it's very hard to go back and edit and change things. Whereas if you make it a block across the whole object and then mask it off with a mask, it means that you can really easily edit those base layers and the colors if you want to tweak things later on down the line. Moving back into Maya, it's on to rigging. Rigging is something I have more experience with than modeling, so this went pretty quick. It was a very, very simple humanoid skeleton mesh. It was very easy because a lot of the skeleton skinning data is basically like skinning a hard surface mesh. Each bone in the rig correlated to a single set of vertices that were separated from everything else on the mesh, which made it very easy to skin. It's when you start having to deal with skin blending and deformations, that's when it starts getting hard skinning. So this was a pretty easy thing to skin in the end. Of course, I did have the sort of soft fungal areas that I created. That skinning was a bit more of a process, but again, not a big one. Right at the end, once I finished all my base skinning, I realized I really wanted to add a jawbone to the mesh because having it sort of hang loose and a bit wonky would, I think, add a lot of visual impact to the final thing. Adding a bone was actually pretty easy. I've forgotten how to do it because I hadn't done it in ages, but if you add a bone, you can just add the influence and then carry on skinning, so it doesn't ruin all the work you've done so far. In the past, I've had to do this and I didn't know about this feature, and I would completely unskin the whole mesh, change the skeleton and reskin the whole mesh, and it was just an absolute nightmare. But adding that influence on that one bone was really simple, and it sped up that process of the creative decision to add that jaw right at the end. But for the moment, that's it. That was making this material variation and mesh variation for this skeleton. Hopefully you found that enjoyable, maybe you found something interesting there to take away and work on your projects. See you in the next one.